Greetings, Algo Artisans. We got a treat for you today. This is a rebroadcast of a show that I did with V the Gorilla and Veles yesterday on the Rogue channel. We talk about what's happening with the markets, with the Japanese yen, and what may happen in the future. And there are some juicy, juicy drips. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Remember, nothing we say is investment advice. Please pause and read this disclaimer.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, folks. No matter where in the heck in the world you are, it is the notorious, glorious, the gorilla in the economist. And we are back with the full group here. We got my main man, Veles, Dark Raven of the Deep State himself, as well as the Algo Cowboy. And folks, listen, is this the big one? Has the meltdown begun? Should you head to the hills or your bunker with cat food in tow? Well, today's broadcast, we're going to discuss all those things, and we're going to break down all the economic news that's been happening today because everybody's been going crazy. My phone's been blown up since last night. It's just been crazy this morning, ever since the Asian markets opened, ever since the yen carry trade has taken a dump, followed by the Tokyo Stock Exchange taking a dump as well, followed by the global markets that are in absolute turmoil. Bitcoin is down, everything's down. Boys, let's get into it. There's lots to discuss. Veles, I'll start with you.
I'm sorry, folks. I don't want to. I don't want to be an ass, but there's just V and Algo can speak to this at a far more finite level than I can, and I've actually written up some prepared comments, but there's part of me that just sits back and laughs at this whole thing because and I'll get into it in a moment, but there are so many factors and so many pieces that are in play right now beyond what's going on in the markets. But I would share with all of you because Tom Luongo, literally on a charged cell phone because he's lost power down in Florida, had some comments this morning because he wanted to weigh in. And other than just everybody calm down, this is not the end of life as we know it. But there's a lot here that's planned. There's a lot here that was known by certain parties how it was going to go down. And to paraphrase from the movie Margin Call, be first, cheat. And the United States and Japan are first. And we're clearing the books.
Yep.
And Europe's going to be a lot more exposed than we are. But there's a lot of FUD out there, folks. And there's a lot of people that are going to try and make you think it's the end of all life as we know it. And they are going to scream from the mountaintops on a level that we have not seen in a while that Jerome Powell's got to cut rates. And, we have 4%, 4% unemployment. Cut rates for what? Anyway, V, Algo, I'll let you guys jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Cowboy.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, so I was up, I was just up last night watching the carnage. I was at a party yesterday. My cousin hosted, I guess, the second most important Russian Orthodox bishop in the country, and it was over at his house. So, we're over there with 100 people, and I didn't see anybody with their phones out, and there was a lot of foreign language being spoken. So I went ahead and followed suit. I'm like, I'm in, I'm in my element in a way, but in another way I'm not. So I'm just going to put my phone away and not look. And, so I leave the party and my phone's blowing up. And I worked all night last night. I think it was up till about 3 a.m. between that and a couple other things I was telling Veles about. So we had a really good Algo Factory show this morning. So anybody who is at Algo Factory with V and myself, and when V's not on vacation, he's there just about every day. So we got some real good data coming at you. And I would not undervalue Veles, what you're going to say, because of course, I'm going to look at the charts and say, I see this and I see that technically, but what's actually happening geopolitically in this case is going to have a ton to do with markets because this is a currency problem or a currency. It's really a play. It's a power play and it's being done through the currency market. So I'm going to leave it there and kind of let you guys take over until you need any enlightenment from me.
V, if it's okay, let me go with some comments I prepared this morning, and then that'll probably be enough food for you two to come in and say, Veles, you need to stop smoking that, or we agree, if that's okay.
It's going to be Veles. Can you please share what you're smoking?
Right.
Probably gonna be the request.
So yes, much like Algo and V, I was up late last night until about 4 o'clock Eastern in the morning, and I was bothering both of them via text with various memes and things. And given the events last Friday and detail that came out around that time about what was going on regarding the markets and so on, I knew, because many had already said it, I knew Sunday evening, because the Asian markets, when they open, we were most probably going to see one heck of a series of events. And so I'm going to start my comments in a strange place, but just stay with me, because it does relate, because there's a lot of threads here, folks. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of players moving around. Yes, it's about Japan, but there were several years behind how we got here, and other things that are going on right now, and the age-old fight between, among many, the London Corporation and Davos. So I'd shared with you all a while back, maybe a week or so ago, that I said a lot of the campuses here in the United States are going to get lit up like Roman candles this fall year. And I also pointed out around that time that I said, hey, there's a lot going on in Bangladesh, which was kind of odd. And it was centered on one of their main universities. And there were calls by the students at that university for a new government and for the prime minister to step down. And I said at the time, things are getting pretty hairy in Bangladesh. And I said, if you think it's purely just those students are upset, that's not what's going on. And just as a reminder, what was the main argument or the main demand of the protesters on America's campuses last spring, or quite a few of them? That they were to cease doing business with Israel or the U.S. Department of Defense, but also they wanted transparency about prior spending by both the DoD and Israel on those schools. And they wanted to know from whom, on what, etc., was that money being spent. And what do you call it? I have direct knowledge of what those protesters were demanding, because I've received copies of their documents that they submitted to various schools. They wanted 2 decades of records. That's a lot for folks. You know, back in the 80s, people just protested and said, hey, stop doing business with South Africa. It's an apartheid government. That's BS. We need to stop doing business with South Africa. When protesters are this specific about, well, we want 2 years of records, and we want to know what kind of money's been spent on America's college campuses, that's directed. No college kid worth their weight knows to ask those questions. So back to Bangladesh. Well, what occurred this morning? Well, given whatever time zone you're in, the prime minister of Bangladesh fled the country this morning. Military is saying they're going to establish a new government just as soon as things calm down a bit. Now, is this because Bangladesh is a major player in international affairs? Well, no, not unless you're talking about cutting up ships that nobody wants anymore, because that's one of the main industries Bangladesh has. But Bangladesh is a dry run and a warning to other governments of what could happen to them. It's like what happened a year or 2 or 3 ago when certain U.S. Congress people started asking too many questions about things in the financial markets and the intelligence community. And suddenly the boyfriends or girlfriends of their kids were all dying in fiery car accidents. Those deaths, and there were several, here in the United States were a warning. Bangladesh is the fiery car accident who's a warning on a bigger scale. Now, this does relate to Japan and those events, so bear with me. So just to demonstrate folks are aware of the danger of what's coming this fall, the University of Indiana last week changed the school's policies about protests and encampments on campus in a major blow to future plans of demonstrators. And then one of my favorites this weekend, the University of Wisconsin, certainly not a paragon of conservative politics, found a way to ban certain pro-Gaza groups from campus. And then lastly, California suddenly found its spine and made significant changes to encampment policies across the state. Now, why did that matter in California's case? Because California's larger universities are public, not private. Makes their ability to shoo demonstrators off their property a lot harder. By the state of California making those moves, it made it a lot easier should things start getting a little ornery this fall. These schools are all taking these measures, plus other things the media hasn't even caught yet or is just not reporting, who are all preemptive. Now, remember Gus Demos's frequent comments about, you want to know who has power? Find out who you're not allowed to criticize. In 3 months, several major schools and states all found their spines after years of taking no action when it came to metropolitan or campus protests. Now, why do you think that is? Not to mention last week, I attended a meeting that was held by Homeland Security, the Department of Education, and several other federal agencies advising America's universities on approaches to managing campus protests. Most of you probably don't even know that even took place. And that was a massive meeting, folks. Every major university in this country was on that call. It was filled with government think speak, but for them to hold such a call with so many agencies communicating to pretty much everybody in academia is kind of rare. And they provided a ton of materials to help schools keep a lid on protests. And this is all by design, my friends. They're trying to contain what's going to go down this fall. So then we have the protests in the UK and Ireland concerning immigration centers being burned to the ground and protests about the influx of immigrants without proper legal processing. Key words, proper legal processing. That's a massive topic, and we don't have the time for that right now. But this much is true. Citizens in those countries could have risen up years ago. They didn't. But now, like campus activity in the United States, some countries are front and center. Doesn't that strike you as odd? It's not conjecture, folks. Those protests, in my opinion, are planned and coordinated and funded by Davos. That and even some pro-London Corporation folks are allowing it because it's a domestic distraction from bigger economic problems. And I have direct eyes on the ground that can confirm from friends of mine the following. There have been large numbers of immigrants coming into countries like the UK and Ireland by plane who have mumps, among other diseases. These people are literally being disinfected on the tarmac. And then they're immediately walked over to another aircraft and put on a plane for the United States. That's a fact. I've had it confirmed. And anybody
wonderful.
Oh, yes. And anybody complaining.
When is Ebola coming over?
Any day now. Anyone complaining to the CDC about that, I'm sure has already been placed on a watch list. So let's turn back the dial a bit. What's one of the bigger contributors to the last few years and how we got here? For many years, V and others in the alternative space have been talking about the planned move to a new financial system. And as I've said on my programs, many global elites went along with it until opportunities arose from which they could personally benefit, even if that led to conflict with other elites, particularly what I've been calling apex elites. And by the way, talking about the quote-unquote mind space on the internet, I've heard suddenly the phrase apex elites popping up in the lexicon of other commentators on air. So someone somewhere is watching Rogue News. Do you all remember that little weirdness in Las Vegas back in 2017, where supposedly Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS, of Saudi Arabia was almost assassinated in Las Vegas? I shared with you in a prior program about a year ago quite a few details about that. And I know private security folks who've told me of many high-profile people who go incognito to public places around the world. They just want to get out of the limelight and act like a regular person for a while. A little makeup, a baseball cap, the right clothes, and they and their security detail just look like anybody else out for a night. I know I say this often about Patrick Ryan's comment about if you try and take out a billionaire, they'll respond by eliminating you personally down to your last genome. If you miss taking out a trillionaire, it's global war every time. Well, MBS is a trillionaire.
Yep.
So let me share with you something one of my friends in government consulting told me recently. They reminded me there are many Saudi princes. In fact, I knew the security leader of one of the Saudi princes. Very overstressed guy, but had a good sense of humor. And a number of the Saudi princes are worth hundreds of millions, and some of them are worth billions. But few of them are worth what MBS is worth. And there have been conflicts among the Saudi royal family members in the past, particularly in the 1970s, and among these princes in that country before. But no one, and I mean nobody, ever tried to kill somebody at MBS's level. Further, actually killing among the princes or members of the royal family is rare. Yet a major globally known event went down in 2017 to try and kill MBS.
Correct.
To quote an old friend of mine, when they try and kill MBS, you could see that from orbit. It was so big. Now, the question my friend asked me was, as they said, Veles, do you seriously think one of the Saudi princes or a group of them suddenly got together and said, hey, I know, we'll kill MBS and take it all for ourselves? That's when the cold chill went through my system in the bar where I was sitting, because the bulb went on in my brain and I realized what happened and why. Because I realized they didn't come up with that on their own. Someone talked them into it or forced them into it. And as we know, when MBS got home, a lot of people were rounded up and they were tortured. And I'm telling you right now, folks, I'm telling you right now today on this rogue program, MBS and his people got the information they needed from those interrogations.
Correct.
The London Corporation put them up to it because MBS was a threat to the London Corporation. Now,
correct.
To repeat what I said a moment ago, it's global war every time. And remember, war can be cyber, war can be economic, as much as it can be kinetic with weapons. And from that day forward, MBS has been laying long-term plans and making careful moves to pay London back for that. Now, there's many pieces, there's parallel plans afoot. This is a multi-party game out there, to quote Tom Longo. But in the end, though, trust me, he consolidated power in Saudi Arabia. He was already working with Donald Trump, and even more so after 2017. He moved forward on his long-term goals. His goal was essentially to eliminate, and there's a lot with this, British power in the Middle East who'd been there since the 1800s. Now, you hear me say those words, but the reality of that statement is immense and it's multifaceted. And it leads us to the events who eventually led to Japan's financial moves the last 4 days. Also, due to the dynamic of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, MBS, to one degree or another, is most probably aligned with Davos. Who knows? They may have been allies prior to that. It's hard to say. All this global unwinding in the markets at present, the failure of all the billions the U.S. laundered through Ukraine to prop up the European Union Central Bank, and on and on and on. It's Davos and MBS. Then the big one, oil's no longer denominated in dollars. Another example of I say the words, but my saying the words in an MBA class in the 1980s would have shaken the foundations of a college campus if I'd said it. We've all lived long enough, folks, to see oil no longer denominated in dollars. Yes, it looks and feels like, in part, these are hits on the United States. But remember, though, the United States and Israel are heavily directed by the London Corporation. So to hit London Corporation, you have to weaken certain parties in the U.S. and Israel. This is, again, coming full circle. This is another reason why all these campus protests, both here and what we just saw in Bangladesh, are taking place. It's also why conditions for the Bank of Japan, depending on who your information source, got bad. Well, how bad were they? Well, depending on certain sources, 500% of their GDP was managing their debt. And when you're considering the whole book on the Japanese economy, that's kind of significant. Not to mention Japan has both domestic and regional realities they have to address, and they've got to address them now. This will also make Japan's economy, once they clean things up, more attractive to draw in capital. Therefore, Japan had to unwind. And they unwound the thing without coordinating with the U.S. And previously, they always kind of coordinated with the United States, even if it didn't look like it. Now, for old international affairs people like me, that also means Japan just made a nationalistic move for their own self-preservation. You know, the last time they did that, they invaded China. And shortly thereafter, they put a new front end on some real estate in Hawaii. This is also where both, quote unquote, the left and the right and Jim Cramer and God knows who else this morning have been literally screaming on TV about Jerome Powell needs to lower rates. Now, I agree with Tom Luongo. Jerome Powell knows what he's doing. In my opinion, even if they take him out at this point, he's served his purpose, God love him. In conclusion, I know a lot of people have lost a lot of money, and I know this is going to continue for a while. I mean, poor Jeff Bezos is at $15 billion, but I'm sure he can afford it. There's a lot of pain, folks. And that's just one of the things as an adult we know are part of the world. And also, don't freak out. You're going to have all the bots and all the alt media types who are on the payroll, and CNBC and Bloomberg and all the others make this out to be the end of all life on the planet because they're going to leverage it to try and distract. This is a move on the chessboard, folks. It's not a lack of control for 1 minute. And there's a wide difference between those two things. And like I said, there are a lot of people who are going to try and leverage this for their own advantage. Now, one of those being maybe the internet is overtaxed with people worried about their investments, or maybe you're being blocked from trades on purpose because as of recent media reports this morning, a number of folks are having trouble executing trades, supposedly at least among a number of platforms. Citibank, Fidelity, E-Trade, Vanguard, TD Ameritrade, Charles Schwab, all of those trading platforms evidently are down or not working very well. Then who's in the worst shape right now, the United States or Europe? The U.S. market is dropping from unnatural highs. Europe, on another level, is in much worse shape. And also, at least for now, if you look at gold and oil, they're not really overreacting. And then the U.S. unemployment rate's at 4%. In the early 1980s, it was more like 10%. Political scientists will tell you at 15 to 20% unemployment, you're looking at revolution. And depending on who the economist is, they'll tell you that 5 or 6% is full employment. So at 4% U.S. unemployment, just speaking of the United States alone, is the world coming to an end? I don't think so. Now, who will be the safe havens in the markets? The first to sell. And who's selling? Japan and the U.S. There's a plan here. We will see what that plan is, and it's coming into visibility. But for a guy like me, though, powerful actors are coming out of the shadows, and they can no longer hide because they have to come into the light because they've either got to save their butts or achieve their goals or both. And that, my friends, is a momentous occasion. The Vorlons in the shadows can't hide anymore, and now we can see them, and we can see what they're doing. And if we're able to, and if we can pick up the correct insights, we're going to learn a lot. We're going to learn a lot about both how we got here and where they're trying to take things. So with that, I'll shut up and yield the floor to Algo and V.
Absolutely. I think you've covered beautifully, what the heck is really going on. I mean, you surmised it very well, Veles. One of the things I will tell you guys is this. If you guys remember back in 2014 and 15, in fact, I had a broadcast one time with a buddy of mine. And we called him the Prince. I don't know if you guys remember this. Cowboy, I don't know if Cowboy, this is even before.
Was it the Prince or was it the Voice?
No, the Prince. And the Prince was basically a buddy of mine. His name is Tarek. I won't mention his last name. But his last name is Ben Saud. So you know who it is, right? He is the son of one of the crown princes of King Faisal, right? And King Faisal was the king before the current King Salman, right? So Tarek and MBS grew up together. They grew up together in Dubai. They grew up together playing PlayStations. They were chilling the same. They were buddies. And right around 2014-15, Tarek told me exactly what the play-by-play was going to be because, Veles mentioned something very critical here. He mentioned London Corporation, and it was a hit on as being the hit on MBS. And he's right because what occurred with Faisal, not Faisal, I'm sorry, with King Salman, right now, right, the ailing king. King Salman was supposed to pick Crown Prince Merkin. Merkin at that time was studying in Oxford. He was studying in Oxford. He was also training with the Royal Air Force, the RAF. He was in every single one of the London, UK, British intelligentsia apparatchiks. They were all grooming him. He was the heir apparent. It was Merkin. I'm going to tell you how this whole thing unraveled. And in the 11th hour, when it was supposed to be Merkin, King Salman picked MBS. And the question that I've had from my buddy Tarek at that time, why did they pick MBS? He goes, V, this is when the Syrian war will start to take a turn. It will take a few years to unwind, but it's going to take a turn, and it's going to stop. I was like, why would it stop, Tarek? And I remember him telling me, he goes, the Syrian war will stop because MBS is half Syrian. I was like, what? MBS's mother is King Salman's favorite wife. MBS's mother, who's a very behind-the-scenes, instrumental and powerful woman, MBS's mother is Syrian.
Oh, no. Oh no! Wait a
Yeah.
minute. And how important of a Syrian?
Very important to the scene.
So now we're
Her,
going to drag
her
Russia into the picture.
her bloodline goes directly to a lot of royal Hashemites that are in Jordan. I'm sorry, that are in Jordan and that are in Syria. Excuse me. Right. So this is the thing. This is the thing that nobody really discussed behind the scenes. Tarek discusses. I mentioned a few times after that. And then Tarek disappeared. He goes, look, I can't communicate with you anymore. My dad and I are going into hiding. There's a lot of things happening. And they went dark. I was like, where are you headed to? Last I heard was Australia. And these are guys who lived in the most lavish luxury in Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, overlooking Central Park, that type of wealth, right? And in fact, he even I said, prove to me that you're really the son of the crown prince. And then Tarek showed to me the newspaper clipping of his mother, who was a blonde woman, who was a former model that grew up in Greenwich, Connecticut, and the wedding picture of them and of her and his father, who was a crown prince, okay? And that wedding picture that was in the Greenwich Times newspaper saying, marrying a prince was the title. So he's the real deal. And when Tara told me that, that's when the whole entire thing, Merkin was out, MBS was in, Palace goes to turmoil, and the last thing he said to me, he goes, MBS is going to get in, and he's going to clean house. And we saw what happened when Ben Talib, right, the Saudi prince who was very close to the Bushes, him and as well as other 180 or 200 crown princes were all imprisoned, all held in hotels. They had their assets seized, their bank accounts liquidated by MBS. Yes. Like what Veles said, some of them were tortured, and they spilled the candy in the lobby and told them exactly what's going on. Why do and this, it all connects to this, folks. It all connects to this. And this is why, the question is MBS Davos or not? No, he's not. He's not. And he's not London Corp either. This is a different player who realizes that he's got he realizes what the UK is. At the end of the day, when you take out the money, the only hooks that the West has in you is monetary. You take the monetary aspects out, you realize at the end of the day, the UK is nothing but the mouse that roared. This is something Vladimir Putin knows. This is why Dmitry Medvedev has said it so eloquently. They're nothing. They're nobody. It's the Wizard of Oz appearing so scary and frightening. But when you pull back the curtain, it's a shriveled old man, hoping that you see him as something more than what he's not. And it's the same situation here. So this is, in one level, it's an FU to the City of London. It's a hell no to Davos. And it's also a rejection of the current petrodollar system, which all these Western parasites have benefited from. Right?
V.
And then, yeah, go ahead.
If I can just jump in for 1 second.
Go for it.
By way of comparison, folks, and forgive me, let me drop a little economics here. Gross domestic product, and yes, it's a wonky figure, and it's not entirely accurate the way it used to be, but it's consumption. The letter C, consumption plus investment plus government spending, and then exports minus imports is how they calculate gross domestic product. When we got hit in 2008, the sole thing that saves a strong word, that really got the U.S. economy going again, it was not government spending. It was not private businesses. It was not the left. It was not the right. It was fracking. We started producing our own oil, which meant that we lowered the cost of energy in the United States, which helped get our GDP back up. We weren't having to import it. There weren't any delays with tankers. We could take U.S. oil, which is lower in sulfur. It refines more quickly in our own refineries. And we dropped the cost of energy to our economy immensely. But one of the things that helped that is, drum roll, energy, oil, has always been calculated in dollars.
Correct.
And now it's not.
Yep.
Which means we just became Argentina. It means we're at the mercy of whatever the going rate is in the market. And I can't possibly emphasize that enough. V, go ahead.
Actually, can I jump in real quick on that?
Yeah, go ahead. Cowboy.
So another way that was what having the oil price in dollars did for the United States was it created an artificial demand for dollars. This is like petrodollar 101. So a lot of you know this. So think of it this way. We've lost that artificial demand. When you can print dollars into infinity and everybody wants dollars because they have to use them in trade, you can print dollars and export that to other countries and in effect export your inflation to other countries because dollars are always wanted and needed. So you can print as much as you want and you're not necessarily going to inflate the economy quite as quickly. If nobody wants your currency, you're going to hyperinflate if you keep printing like we do. That's the first nail in the coffin. Now, I don't want to be stealing anybody's thunder here, but another place they hide the inflation is in the stock market. And the way that things work around the world after World War II is basically everybody sells their goods to the U.S. The U.S. gives everybody dollars. Those dollars end up going back into the U.S. equities system. And then, of course, the petrodollar kind of helped to reinforce that. And since things have been kind of eroding on the petrodollar front, Japan for, 20 years, what they've been doing is the carry trade. And I think I'll let V explain that, and Veles maybe even kind of go over the carry trade a little bit more deeply. But the carry trade has what has kept our equities, our stock market going like it is. And that is what we're seeing taken apart right now. So I'm going to hand it off to V and Veles to go ahead and maybe do a better explanation of that than I would.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole.
But I also derailed the Saudi conversation, so I don't know if you want to swing back to that. It's all you.
It's not a derail. Yeah. It's all part of it.
It's not derail at all. And again, I want to make something abundantly clear here. There's somebody in the comment section saying that I'm repeating some QAnon bullshit from 2017. Go back and listen to this broadcast. 2014 and 2015 is when I said what I had to say about what was happening in Saudi Arabia, about MBS, about Merkin, about all of that. And it's also the same amount of time where I wrote Japan the Mischief Engine. There was like a 5,000 word article that I wrote, and I actually put that into, I think, one of our first newsletters that we did for at that time, Rogue Money. We weren't even Rogue News at that time. We were still Rogue Money at that time. So I'll dig that up because it's a very poignant article, and a lot of things that I wrote about has come back to haunt us. One of the things was the evisceration of the yen carry trade. The second thing is the end of the petrodollar. One of the things I talked about is that I've always said this from Jump Street. The American dream is built on Saudi pipelines. Okay, it's so pertinent. Like Veles nailed it. It's so important. It's so pertinent that the dollar, that the petroleum is not only priced in dollars, but it's also purchased in dollars. And we're no longer collecting the fees because we are what? At the end of the day, we're a rentier economy. We're a rent-seeking economy, right? We don't have captains of industry. We're not Russia, where you have captains of industries, right? We're not China, where we have captains of industry. Our billionaires are paper pushers. They make money off of dividends, of paper. They're rent seekers, and thus we have a rent-seeking economy. Okay? And all of this system, which is just a giant smoke screen, a giant deck of cards, that you can only create it this way if your ultimate intent is to create as much fraud as possible and extract as much wealth as possible from nations and from people. And that's what we have today, folks. It's like the jig is up, right? It's like the next several months I know is going to be hectic. We've been talking about it at Algo Factory, Cowboy, every single day for months on end. What's going to happen in the fall, the build up to the fall. All the data is pointing towards a big event in the fall. We've been saying it since like the start of the end of 2023, Cowboy, if I'm not mistaken.
Earlier.
And here we are, and we have all the timestamps on the charts, and we can pull all the charts for you and show you all the timestamps that we talked about. We've been charting this a year in advance. A year in advance. And here we are.
V, I don't think you feel strongly enough about this topic.
Well, now here's the funny thing too. So I'm watching all these crypto heads LARPing as like geopolitical currency market experts now. We've been talking about the currency trade unwind since I'm going to say mid-year last year or the fall. We've been talking about it. Tom Luongo's been talking about it. I've been doing videos the last 2 months because I keep telling people, and I mean, not just in Algo Factory Private, which we've been talking about for a long time, but even on the Algo Factory videos that I do, sometimes daily, sometimes a few times a week, like watch the Japanese yen. When it goes above 152, we're seeing a major shift. And it's interesting that they actually powered it up all the way up to like 160. And now they let it fall. So it seems as if the Japanese went ahead, let it head up, gave it some, kinetic energy to fall, and then they took the legs out from under it. And man, it's just carnage. And it's in a certain disgusting way. It's really fun to watch. I hate to say that, but I like pain.
Algo and V, correct me if I'm wrong, the unwind by Japan is 20 trillion, correct?
Jesus, yes.
That's actually, the numbers are news to me, Veles, but $20 trillion. I mean, look, what did they hide from Bank of America's like derivatives was about 65 trillion was it V back in like 2008. So a $20 trillion unwind. Now the question I have is that a derivatives? Is that a leveraged unwind or is that a spot unwind? I bet you that's leverage.
Point taken.
It's leverage. It's definitely it's a leverage unwind. It's not a spot unwind.
The numbers here are going to go, Veles, towards your comment about this is not the end of the world. If it's a $20 trillion unwind, that is absorbable because we have absorbed far more in the past. So look, this could be, oh man, such a dirty way of saying this. But look, when you're in markets, when you're a trader, you just talk dirty. This is either the fart or it's going to be the shit. And the farts always come first. So we're
also, folks, what has Algo and V and Gus, for that matter, I mean, many folks here on Rogue, but what have the both of them been talking about for quite some time? It's their area more than mine, but physical assets, stuff, because again, I am not playing fast and loose here when I say, oh, well, it doesn't matter, it's just electronic money. No, it matters. But in the end, when the smoke clears, who's got land? Who's got steel? Who's got raw copper? Who's got commodities? And I'm going to go there. Who's got precious metals?
Yep.
How long, even I'm going to jump on this bandwagon, how long have even I been reporting to you for at least 2 years, maybe a little longer, where every so often I pull off of some obscure goddamn banking website or something and I start getting into, here's how much bullion just got exchanged between these countries. Here's how many mines are now operating on top of the existing ones in Indonesia, pulling even more precious metals. How many, and of course, very near to my heart because I've been down there. How many times have I brought up Paraguay, Chile, Peru, and all the weirdness in their elections? Why? Because everybody's trying to get their paws on those countries' mines to get access to the raw materials because that's a physical damn asset.
Right.
And this is where this is all going. And this is why all these countries, China in particular, but why so many of these countries have been acquiring bullion and also not just gold, platinum, but they've been acquiring any metal of value they can get their paws on to bolster their currencies. Now, why in the name of God would they do that unless everybody had some kind of smoke-filled room moment where it's like, could be Japan, could be the U.S., could be the Brits, could be the Swiss, who knows? But somewhere, somebody is going to pull that trigger.
And the Japanese did it.
There's
go ahead, Algo.
Well, actually, so V, Andy Schechter's like not the biggest player, right, in the gold game, but
No,
He did
not even by a long shot.
Not by a long shot, but he had some good things to say, and this is directly talking Veles to talking about like from the financial end of the acquisition of metals. So in 2017, the private central banks around the world started to acquire physical gold at a rate. In that 1 year, from 2017 to 18, they acquired more physical gold than they did in the prior 60 years combined. And at the time that they started to acquire gold, gold was a tier 3 asset, which means that on the balance sheet, gold is worth half on a balance sheet its actual value. So if you had $100 billion in gold, it's worth $50 billion on a balance sheet. So you're not able to use it to shore up your finances to play the long game, right?
Yeah.
So they're acquiring all this gold. And then in 2018, all of a sudden, after these central banks started like times 60 or better their gold acquisition, they just started buying gold like it's no tomorrow. All of a sudden, it got flipped over to a tier 1 asset. So all the gold they bought, all of a sudden now is worth 100% of its real value on the balance sheet. So if all the central banks did it at the same time, and it's a year before it got flipped to tier 1, I mean, if there wasn't a smoke-filled room, then I got a bridge to sell you.
Yeah, exactly. No, it was very, very quickly coordinated. There's no doubt about it, man. There's no doubt about it. It's interesting because everybody is right now racing to get every single metal that's not in the if they could extract it from the mantle, they would. They're trying to get everything in the kitchen sink, everything. And I have some calls later on this week with my guys that are in the commodity sector, that guys who play in the mining aspect where they're extracting strategic metals, and we all know about some of the strategic metals. I've said it multiple times here, right? One of which where I cut my teeth in was cobalt and molybdenum, and then vanadium, but also rhenium. Rhenium's a big thing. You cannot make a jet engine without rhenium. You cannot make missile components without rhenium. And rhenium is super, super expensive. And it's only 800 to 900 tons are mined per year. That's how important this metal is. Rhenium, hafnium, gallium, infinium, all these metals. They're running after all of it. Why? Because it seems as if, while the U.S. is talking about building a strategic Bitcoin reserve, the rest of the world is actually getting physical things. The rest of the world is saying, hey, you know what? We're going to back our currencies with some sort of either energy or a commodity, Veles. That's what it's going to look like.
Yep. Absolutely.
And we have all that deep storage gold, V, the U.S. Don't we have the deep storage gold?
It's so deep. It's so deep. But it's there. Trust us. It's there. It's just really deep right now.
It's like deep in so deep you'll never find it ever.
You'll never ever find it. That's how deep it is.
To paraphrase from Marvel with the one villain, you'll never see me coming. Yeah, and not to harp on a easy to attack target, folks, but it's also I don't want to say joke, that's not fair, but this humor, shall we say, around Fort Knox, where again it's another one of those moments where how many people have asked the question, where's the audit? Well, we can't tell you. It's a national asset of the United States. In fact, if I listen to Patrick Ryan or some other folks that just purely, there's a lot of folks that will rub their temples and say, I can't. No, there's no way that could be true. But it's this whole thing about the United States received gold from countries in Europe before World War II broke out. And then when the war was over, and in particular France said, we want our money back, the French sent several warships to park off the United States to say, hey, we're not kidding. And the United States showed up with other warships and said, oh, that's cute. You have a navy. So do we. And the French sailed home. And this goes to V's comment about we have been repaying people in dollars for their assets. But since 1945, countries around the world There's no other way to say it. They've been, for those for whom they have the means, and this is a thing, they've been slowly rebuilding their bullion reserves.
Yep.
And it reminds me, folks, and this is no joke. It was either the World Bank or the IMF, and I remember it vividly, in 1970, announced that the global economy did not recover from the effects of World War II in the loss of population, in the loss of industrial output, in the loss of technological development. The global economy did not recover from the beginning of World War II, which they loosely counted as 1939. It was earlier than that if you include Japan's invasion of China. But net, since roughly 1938, 1939 to 1945, the global economy did not recover until literally the summer of 1970. That's how long it took to recover. And in a similar vein, look how long it took for countries to acquire not only bullion of their own, but bullion sufficient for the much larger global economy we have today. Now, as the old joke goes, is anybody in a position to make a one-to-one to say, oh yeah, we can easily denominate all of our currency in gold? No way. Could you do it with a basket of currencies or other commodities? I leave that to the economists. From what I've read, it's possible. But my point is, many of these countries have enough gold that they can strengthen their currencies. It's like the whole thing about bank reserves. I don't need to have every dollar sitting in the vault of a bank branch for every person that banks with that bank branch. I just need whatever it is, 15% or whatever of cash on hand. These countries have a percentage of what they need if, God forbid, there should be a run on their currency, or they have other national problems, or whatever it might be, or the big one. They got to go cap in hand to another country and say, look, Germany, we need additional money to bolster our currency, or whatever it might be, which has happened. So this will be very interesting to see how this plays out. I think an interesting question, for which I'm not sure we know the answer, is will countries continue to continue to try and bolster their precious metal reserves, or have they acquired? I mean, like, this is it. Like, the war has now started, so there's no point in them acquiring that much more. We'll see. But
it's very interesting, right? Every expert that has been saying for quite some time, and real guys who track this kind of stuff, and for those folks that don't know, a lot of the 100% of my precious metals business that we do with the procurement, the logistics, the delivery, all that stuff. My entire business partners, and they're all in Hong Kong and in Singapore. And I'll tell you right now, it's from the best of the best minds that I've spoken to, China has currently north of 30,000 metric tons of gold. Russia's sitting at north of 20,000. India's sitting north of 30,000. The United States sitting north of God knows what. It's deep storage. Trust us, it's there. By the way, here's Bitcoin for some strategic reserves.
Actually, I know where the audit is.
You do.
It's in deep storage with the gold.
Makes perfect sense. It's like when like somebody in the comment section talked about Germany when they wanted their gold back from the New York Fed, and the Fed's like, well, we can't show you the gold because we don't have a proper viewing room.
That's just an FU is what that is.
That's my other favorite line, where India keeps asking for certain key jewels back from the British, and the British just respond by saying, "You're not getting that back." Britain, stop taking everybody's stuff.
Yeah.
There's another edge to this whole thing, and it's my understanding that part of the way that we attempted to make whole the rest of the world in, the 1971 coming off of the gold standard was that we allowed the rights to a lot of minerals in the United States to be owned by countries to whom we actually owed that gold. And this is right about the same time that the EPA was created. And it just so happens that a lot of these minerals, to the rights to which a lot of these countries are debtor or our creditors hold, and they happen to be under national parks, so we can't get to them.
What are the odds?
Yeah.
The EPA. It's what it's. It was.
In other news, Veles. In other news, Russian Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu, a man who actually has talent and brains, as opposed to the equivalents we have here in America, has shown up in Tehran, Iran, to meet with the newly elected president of Iran. This hot on the heels of our friends in the Levant going on an assassination spree. What are your takes on this, fellas?
I am of the belief, and God, the Middle East. I am of the belief that we have a carefully controlled conflict in the region where, in my opinion, because it's happened before, and I don't want to oversimplify, but Hitler rose to power using the brutality of the SA, and then the Schutzstaffel, the SS, were created. The SS was a more desirable asset. So Hitler had to get rid of one of them. So he got rid of the brown shirts, the SA. Saddam Hussein, as I shared with all of you on a program, had 3 intelligence agencies. Periodically, he would pick one and tell the other 2 they've become disloyal. And then the other 2 intelligence agencies would wipe out the 3rd, and then Saddam would create a whole new 3rd and keep everybody at each other's throats. The Tet Offensive, contrary to the whole thing about, the American army was almost overwhelmed or whatever. No, that was North Vietnam cleaning house and getting rid of the Viet Cong, because they wanted to make sure that only regular army and regular military would be in the field once the smoke cleared, because they didn't want to have to deal with the Viet Cong anymore. So Hamas and Hezbollah and other similar types of organizations have always been proxies. And there are a lot of proxies, folks. There are hacking groups that are proxies. Have no misgivings about that. And periodically, the proxies become a problem. And so sometimes you got to clean house. So this is an opportunity for, in my opinion, certain parties in the Levant and certain parties in Persia, for both of them to justify conflict with each other to clean house. Because much as Gus and many others have made the famous statement, you'll know who is in power by who you're not allowed to make fun of. There's another phrase I like, which was told to me by friends of mine in the Cuban American community, which is, if you want to really know what the hell's going on, I'm dead serious, go find out whose kids are attending private universities in Switzerland. You'll be amazed whose kids are friends at private universities in Switzerland. People for whom the governments aren't talking to each other. The leaders of those countries might even be claiming they're trying to kill each other. But their kids are sitting in bars getting hammered.
Yep.
And they've also got a lot of the family's wealth outside the country too, just in case. So, in my opinion, America's sending troops to the Middle East. Yes, we are. But we have so damn many troops in so many countries. I mean, to me, it's like, okay, so we moved a couple of thousand folks out of Germany and moved them into the region. Okay, everybody, you're getting a tan. It's like, are we going to war on behalf of Israel to go after Iran? Well, there's people that want you to believe that. Heck, we might even attack Iran at one point. But in the words of somebody in the alt space over this weekend who made an amusing comment about that one of the things they do is they have friends of theirs in the trucking industry in the Middle East. And what do? They monitor, I'm dead serious, they monitor to see who's moving 55-gallon drums out into the middle of the desert. Why? Because they fill them with paraffin and gasoline so that when the missiles come over, it looks really impressive, like a base just got blown up. But it didn't. It's just fireworks. It's meant to look like the two countries are shooting at each other. There's literally contractors in the Middle East, folks, that this is what they do. So unless I see real targets getting hit, unless I see real, by my standards, things happening,
correct,
everybody is cleaning house. Japan is cleaning house financially. The Middle East,
yes, they are,
via proxies. And we'll see where this takes us.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. Boys, great show today. Any closing statements, Cowboy, Veles?
I'll jump in here. So again, I would caution people who think this is the end of the world. I know, Veles, that's kind of your message, right? It's not to panic. Sound about right?
Yes, sir.
So, V and I talked about this morning, and I like the concept of cleaning house. Did you see the post in there by Mary in Japan? I actually put it up on the screen.
I love Mary.
It's right here on the screen. Leading news here at the moment, she's obviously in Japan. Japanese stocks are starting to become aware of the worst case scenario for the Japanese economy. The tailwind of the yen's appreciation has been halted and policies are dysfunctional. I'm assuming that means that they're going to reverse course on what they've been doing to the stock market. I'm not exactly sure what that means. If you guys want to take a shot at that, interpret that message, which policies are dysfunctional that they're talking about. But, V, I don't know if you want to share too much at the end here of what we talked about at Algo Factory, but I think a lot of people are probably wanting to know what's going to happen to the markets. So I'm going to actually just leave it here and thank you guys for such a great show.
Yeah, and I'll kudos to Hobo. We love you, Hobo, who posted, is this a controlled burn? Yeah, I think we're seeing a controlled burn, folks, in a lot of places. The question is this, are we burning, as they say in oil fires, are we just burning off the material that's on the surface, or has it actually hit the, the tanks? We need more time, but right now, this all feels controlled burn. It will be interesting to see from what is said versus what is done in Japan. And as I know, V and Algo and myself were monitoring last night. I mean, the South Koreans, they froze their exchanges at one point. A couple other safety controls kicked in. And then somebody also pointed on an alternative board, a very important takeaway, which is the bots, folks. We can't ever forget about the bots. The minute these market activities start to take place, you got all these damn bots that come to life and go, oh, a certain criteria was reached. I'm going to start unloading certain positions, or I'm going to start picking up certain positions. And truth be told, and again, I defer to the experts, and I am not Algo and I am not V, but some of the times the reason why these automatic controls kick in is not because they're worried about individual investors. They're worried about the bots getting out of control. So that's the other thing here, folks, is we gotta let the bots get the software updates out there and let that clear out. And that's probably going to take a good 48 hours, because you're also going to need a whole bunch of people to go in and start adjusting those bots based on reality. We probably won't really be able to start walking around the wreckage here until Friday. But just a small sidebar, I'm not sure I'll have a show on Friday. I'm trying to put one together. V, I know I did my usual thing of, V, I'm not doing a show. You know what? I might be doing a show. So we'll see if I can pull it together. But I am very thankful, V and Algo, the three of us were able to get on today, especially for all of you in the audience for such a momentous moment in history that this is. And stay tuned, and we'll be here.
Quick sidebar. I know I said I was done, but to the bot conversation, Zero Hedge had some article and it said recession, and everybody's saying recession. What ended up happening was there is a very specific theoretical, non-official, by the way, communist scientist who was like one of the Obama people or something. And she had some like definition of recession after 3 months of the average payrolls looking a certain way. That's their version of recession. I think they're called the STOM or something like that. So they took this one metric that's really obscure and they turned it into an article headline that said recession. So, these are the kind of things you have to watch out for. And that's it. That's all I got.
Very well said. And with that being said, folks, we are at the end of the show. We should be back tomorrow, depending on who's scheduled. Again, we're kind of running on a summer schedule here. As people are on vacation, traveling, and taking care of this and that and the others. I mean, let's be honest, it's been a rough, crazy year for all of us. So keep it locked and loaded right here. We'll be back. Cheers, everybody. Have a great day.
I hope this video was helpful. Please come over to algofactory.tech. We teach people how to build their own trading method, otherwise known as an algorithm. You don't have to know how to code, but if you do code, we can put you on the path to where you can build something that trades for you while you're not at the computer. If you just want to trade manually, which is what most people are doing, then that is, of course, something that we can help you do and help you have the capability to possibly extract money out of these markets on a regular basis. And while we do focus on crypto for a lot of these videos, I'm actually primarily a Forex trader, and you got to know that crypto doesn't go forever. it goes for about a year, year and a half, and then for a couple of years, there's not much going on in crypto. And if you want to be a trader, you're going to want to understand how to really trade, how to put on those big boy pants, because what's going to happen is eventually crypto's going to flatten out and the meme coins aren't going to be what they used to be, most likely. I've seen it enough times and been in this game since 2017. I don't expect that to change. So come on over, learn how to trade. As a matter of fact, we got some pretty happy customers who are already down the path of success in their algo building. Let's hear from one of those right now.
Hey, Cowboy, V. I just wanted to give a heartfelt thanks for putting this project together. I initially joined Algo Factory a year ago, concerned about a repeat of the 2008 great financial crisis and the prospect of losing my job again. Within 12 months, under V and Cowboy's expert tuition, including live reviews, I've created a profitable algorithm launched across a selection of assets. Now, facing the prospect of redundancy and a nice fat severance package to trade with, my current worst case scenario is to keep my job. Thanks again, guys. Really appreciate what you've done here.
AlgoFactory.tech. Trade your job, upgrade your life. We'll see you on the next one.